In the fading light of a crisp autumn evening, Evelyn Thornton's stilettos clicked sharply against the polished marble of her law firm's lobby. Her tailored suit and perfectly coiffed hair belied the storm brewing within her. As she pushed through the revolving door, a gust of wind whipped around her, carrying with it a familiar scent that stopped her dead in her tracks. "Hello, Evelyn." That voice, it sent shivers down her spine, a mixture of nostalgia and dread. Evelyn turned slowly, her green eyes narrowing as they fell upon the figure leaning against a sleek black car. "Marcus," she said flatly, struggling to keep her voice steady. "What are you doing here?" Marcus Blackwood, with his tousled dark hair and day-old stubble, looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, or more likely, been hunched over a typewriter for days. His leather jacket was worn, a far cry from the tailored suits he used to wear in their shared past. "Believe me, I wouldn't be here if I had a choice," Marcus replied, his tone a mixture of sarcasm and resignation. "But it seems fate has other plans for us." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, waving it in the air. "Remember Aunt Iris? Well, she's gone and done it this time." The mention of Marcus's eccentric great-aunt sent a wave of memories crashing over Evelyn. Family gatherings, holiday dinners, and whispered tales of a mysterious island that had been in the family for generations. Aunt Iris, with her wild silver hair and mischievous eyes, had always been a source of both wonder and exasperation. "What's she done now?" Evelyn asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Marcus's lips quirked into a half-smile. "She's left us an inheritance. Both of us." "What?" Evelyn exclaimed, her composure cracking. "But I'm not even family anymore. We're divorced." "Yeah, I know." Marcus finished, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Trust me, I'm as thrilled about this as you are." The next morning found them in a lawyer's office, listening to the reading of Aunt Iris's will. The eccentric old woman had left them Whispering Cove, a mysterious island off the coast of Maine. The catch? They had to live there together for 1 month to claim their inheritance. As they boarded the small boat that would take them to the island, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change irrevocably. Little did she know just how right she was. Whispering Cove rose from the mist like something out of a fairy tale. Lush forests covered rolling hills, giving way to pristine beaches. And there, perched atop the highest point, stood a majestic lighthouse, its beacon cutting through the fog. As they stepped onto the island, Evelyn felt a strange tingling sensation wash over her. It was as if the very air was charged with electricity. She glanced at Marcus and saw that he felt it too. His eyes were wide, and there was a flush of excitement on his cheeks. "Do you feel that?" he whispered, leaning close to her. Evelyn nodded, unable to find words. For the first time since this crazy adventure began, she felt a spark of real excitement. Maybe, just maybe, there was something magical about this place after all. They made their way to Aunt Iris's house, a charming Victorian mansion that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight. Inside, they found a note from Iris, along with a mysterious silver box. "My dears," the note read, "welcome to Whispering Cove. This island has been in our family for generations, guarding a power beyond imagination. It can grant wishes, but be warned, every wish comes with a price. The island gives, but it also takes. You have 1 month to uncover the island's secrets and decide its fate. Choose carefully, for your choices will shape not only your futures, but the future of Whispering Cove itself." That night, as Evelyn lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the island, the distant crash of waves, the rustle of leaves, and something else, something that sounded almost like whispering, she couldn't help but think about the silver box, still sitting untouched on the desk in the study. "What do you wish for, Evelyn Thornton?" The question echoed in her mind, keeping sleep at bay. What did she wish for? Success? She already had that. Money? She had plenty. Love? She pushed that thought away as quickly as it had come. She didn't need love. She was fine on her own. Happy even, wasn't she? The next morning, Evelyn and Marcus decided to explore the island, starting with the lighthouse. As they climbed the winding path, the whispers Evelyn had been hearing since their arrival grew louder, more insistent. "Do you hear that?" Marcus asked, his voice hushed. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "You hear it too? The whispers?" Marcus nodded, his eyes wide. I thought I was going crazy. What do you think it is?" Before Evelyn could respond, a gust of wind swept over them, carrying with it a cascade of whispers that were almost but not quite intelligible. "Come, danger, wish, beware." The disjointed words sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. She grabbed Marcus's hand without thinking, an old instinct resurfacing in the face of the unknown. At the top of the lighthouse, they discovered a hidden room. In its center stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal sat an object that made Evelyn's breath catch in her throat. It was a crystal about the size of a fist that seemed to contain a universe within it. Colors swirled in its depths, and as Evelyn watched, she could have sworn she saw images forming and dissolving, flashes of possible futures, paths not taken. "The heart of the island," Marcus breathed, his voice filled with awe. "This must be what grants the wishes." As they stood there, transfixed, the whispers rose to a crescendo, no longer unintelligible, but crystal clear. "Choose wherever every wish has its price. The fate of Whispering Cove rests in your hands." That night, as Evelyn tossed and turned in her bed, unable to sleep, she heard a strange sound coming from outside. Looking out the window, she saw a creature straight out of myth, a cross between a deer and a bird, with iridescent feathers and delicate antlers that seemed to glow in the moonlight. As she watched, it turned its head and looked directly at her, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly intelligence. The next morning, Evelyn and Marcus ventured into the forest, hoping to learn more about the island's secrets. They stumbled upon a clearing with an ancient tree at its center. Carved into its trunk were hundreds of names, all the people who had owned the island over the generations. And there at the top, freshly carved, were their own names: Evelyn Thornton, Marcus Blackwood. Before they could process this discovery, the mystical creature from the night before appeared in the clearing. To their utter astonishment, it spoke. "Welcome, guardians of Whispering Cove," it said, its voice a melodic trill that seemed to resonate in their very bones. "We have been waiting for you." The creature explained that they were now the guardians of Whispering Cove, responsible for managing the island's magic and the consequences of the wishes granted. If they refused this role, the magic of Whispering Cove would fade, and with it, the island itself. As the sun set on their second full day on Whispering Cove, Evelyn and Marcus found themselves back in Aunt Iris's study, surrounded by stacks of old books and journals. They had spent hours poring over every scrap of information they could find, trying to make sense of their new roles as guardians. "Listen to this," Marcus said, looking up from a leather-bound journal. "The power of Whispering Cove is not to be taken lightly. Each wish granted shifts the balance of the island. As guardians, we must be prepared for the consequences, both seen and unseen." Evelyn sighed, rubbing her temples. "This is insane, Marcus. We're not equipped for this. I'm a lawyer, you're a writer. We're not magical guardians." Marcus looked at her, a familiar determination in his eyes. "Maybe not, but Aunt Iris chose us for a reason, and I, for one, want to know why." As night fell once again on Whispering Cove, Evelyn stood at the window of her bedroom, looking out at the moonlit island. She couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had changed irrevocably. The magic of Whispering Cove was real, and it had chosen them. What would they wish for? And more importantly, what price would they be willing to pay? Little did Evelyn and Marcus know, their greatest challenges were yet to come. The magic of Whispering Cove was awakening, and with it, tests that would push them to their limits, force them to confront their past, and perhaps, just perhaps, find their way back to each other. The adventure had only just begun. As the days passed on Whispering Cove, Evelyn and Marcus fell into an uneasy routine. Mornings were spent poring over Aunt Iris's journals, afternoons exploring the island, and evenings were for wishes. They had decided to start small, testing the limits of the island's magic. Their first wish was simple, a perfect cup of coffee. The next morning, they awoke to the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the house. It was indeed the best cup either of them had ever tasted. But as they savored their magical brew, Evelyn noticed something odd. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight with concern, "look at the plants." The lush houseplants that had decorated the sunroom were now withered and brown, as if they had been deprived of water for weeks. Marcus frowned, running a finger over a crisp leaf that crumbled at his touch. "The price," he murmured. "Every wish has a price." It was a sobering reminder of the responsibility they now carried. As the days went on, they continued to experiment, always watching carefully for the consequences of their wishes. A wish for a gourmet meal resulted in an empty pantry. A wish for a day of perfect weather led to a week of storms. Each wish, no matter how small, seemed to take something in return. "We need to be more careful," Evelyn insisted one evening as they sat in the study, surrounded by Aunt Iris's journals. "We can't just keep making wishes willy-nilly. We need a system, a way to predict and manage the consequences." Marcus nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You're right, but how? It's not like there's a user manual for magical islands." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "Maybe there is. Look at all these journals. Aunt Iris must have kept records of the wishes made during her time as guardian. If we study them, maybe we can find patterns, learn how to control the magic better." And so began their deep dive into the history of Whispering Cove. They spent hours each day reading through decades of journal entries, piecing together the island's magical past. As they worked, Evelyn couldn't help but be reminded of their early days together, when they would stay up late into the night, Marcus bouncing story ideas off her as she prepared for her bar exam. There was an easy camaraderie between them that she had thought long lost. One afternoon, as they were taking a break from their research, Marcus suggested they explore the beach. "We've been cooped up in this house for days," he said. "Some fresh air might do us good." Evelyn agreed, and soon they found themselves walking along the shore, the sound of waves a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "Do you ever wonder," Marcus said suddenly, "what would have happened if we hadn't, you know?" Evelyn felt her heart skip a beat. They had been carefully avoiding any discussion of their past, focusing instead on the task at hand. But now, with the sun setting over the ocean and the magic of the island humming in the air around them, it seemed impossible to ignore. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, "but we can't change the past, Marcus. We made our choices." He turned to look at her, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "But what if we could? We're on a magical island, Evelyn. We could wish for anything. We could wish to go back, to fix things." For a moment, Evelyn was tempted. The idea of erasing all the pain, all the arguments, all the years of loneliness, it was intoxicating. But then she remembered the withered plants, the empty pantry, the storms. "No," she said firmly, "we can't. The price would be too high. And besides," she added, her voice softening, "would it really be us if we erased all that history, all those experiences that shaped us?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, as usual," he added with a wry smile. "When did you get so wise?" Evelyn laughed, a sound that surprised them both. "Oh, probably around the time I inherited a magical island. Nothing like a little supernatural responsibility to put things in perspective." As they continued their walk, Evelyn felt something shift between them. The tension that had been present since their arrival seemed to ease, replaced by a tentative warmth. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Their moment of peace was short-lived, however. As they rounded a bend in the shoreline, they came face to face with the deer bird creature they had encountered in the forest. "Guardians," it said, its melodic voice tinged with urgency. "The balance is shifting. A great wish has been made, one that threatens the very fabric of Whispering Cove." Evelyn and Marcus exchanged alarmed glances. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "We haven't made any big wishes." The creature's eyes, swirling pools of gold and silver, fixed on them with an unnerving intensity. "Not you," it said, "another, one who seeks to claim the island's power for themselves." "But how is that possible?" Evelyn demanded. "We're the guardians. Aunt Iris left the island to us." The creature tilted its head, antlers catching the last rays of the setting sun. "The magic of Whispering Cove is ancient and complex. There are loopholes, ways for others to access its power if they know how." "Who is it?" Marcus asked. "Who made the wish?" But the creature was already fading, its form becoming translucent. "Find the heart of the island," it said, its voice growing faint. "Only there can the balance be restored." And then it was gone, leaving Evelyn and Marcus alone on the beach with more questions than answers. They raced back to the house, all thoughts of their earlier conversation forgotten in the face of this new threat. They spent the next several days poring over Aunt Iris's journals with renewed vigor, searching for any mention of the heart of the island or ways that outsiders could access its magic. It was Evelyn who finally found the clue they needed. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a passage in one of the oldest journals. "It mentions a nexus of power at the center of the island, a place where all the magical energy converges." Marcus leaned in, reading over her shoulder. "It says the nexus is hidden, that only true guardians can find it. But how?" Evelyn flipped through a few more pages, then stopped, her eyes widening. "Here, it says the path to the nexus will be revealed when two hearts beat as one and the island's song is heard." They looked at each other, the implications of those words hanging heavy between them. Two hearts beating as one. It seemed the island had plans for them after all. "We need to figure this out," Marcus said, his voice determined. "Whatever this other person is planning, it can't be good. We have to stop them." Evelyn nodded, pushing aside her confusion about their personal situation. There would be time to sort that out later. Right now, they had an island to save. The next morning, they set out into the forest, following the whispers that had guided them since their arrival. As they walked, Evelyn found herself hyper-aware of Marcus's presence beside her. The warmth of his arm brushing against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Despite everything, there was still a connection between them, a familiarity that went bone deep. They had been walking for hours when they came across a clearing they had never seen before. In its center stood a massive tree, its trunk easily as wide as a car. But it was what was carved into the bark that made them both gasp. Hundreds of names, etched into the wood in various states of fading. Some were so old they were barely legible, while others looked freshly carved. And there, at the very top, were their own names. Evelyn Thornton, Marcus Blackwood, the guardian tree. Evelyn breathed, remembering a passage from one of Iris's journals. It records all the guardians of Whispering Cove throughout history. Marcus reached out, tracing their names with his finger. As he did, the tree began to glow with a soft, pulsing light. The whispers in the forest grew louder, coalescing into a melody that seemed to resonate in their very bones. "The island's song," Marcus said, his eyes wide with wonder. Without thinking, Evelyn reached out and took his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the glow from the tree intensified, and the ground beneath their feet began to shift. A path appeared before them, shimmering with an otherworldly light. It led deeper into the forest, to a part of the island they had never seen before. "I think," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we just found the way to the heart of the island." They looked at each other, years of history passing between them in a single glance. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Hand in hand, Evelyn and Marcus set off down the shimmering path towards the nexus of Whispering Cove's power. With each step, they could feel the magic of the island growing stronger, thrumming through their veins like electricity. But as they ventured deeper into uncharted territory, a sense of foreboding settled over them. Somewhere out there, someone was trying to harness the island's power for their own ends. And Evelyn and Marcus were the only ones who could stop them. As the path wound through the increasingly dense forest, Evelyn found herself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. When she first arrived on Whispering Cove, all she wanted was to get through the month and return to her normal life. Now, the thought of leaving the island filled her with a strange sense of loss. And then there was Marcus. The anger and resentment she had carried for so long had begun to fade, replaced by... what? She wasn't sure yet. But as they walked hand in hand towards an uncertain future, Evelyn realized that whatever happened, she was glad he was by her side. Suddenly, the path before them opened up into another clearing. But unlike the peaceful glade where they had found the guardian tree, this one crackled with palpable energy. At its center stood a familiar figure, one that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "Hello, Evelyn." "Marcus," said the man, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "I've been expecting you." It was Richard Blackwood, Marcus's estranged father and the black sheep of the family, the man who had nearly bankrupted the Blackwood Empire years ago with his reckless business decisions and gambling addiction. "Dad!" Marcus's voice was a mix of shock and anger. "What are you doing here?" Richard's smile widened, revealing two white teeth. Why, I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine, of course. This island, its power. It should have been left to me. I'm the eldest Blackwood, after all. That's not how it works, Evelyn said, stepping forward. The island chooses its guardians, and it chose us. Richard laughed, a harsh sound that seemed to ripple through the clearing. Oh, my dear. There's so much you don't understand about Whispering Cove. But don't worry, I'll be happy to demonstrate. He raised his hands, and suddenly the air around them seemed to warp and twist. Evelyn felt a wave of dizziness wash over her, and she stumbled, her hand slipping from Marcus's grasp. When her vision cleared, she found herself alone in the clearing. Marcus and Richard were gone, as was the shimmering path that had led them there. "Marcus!" she called out, panic rising in her throat. "Marcus!" But only the whispers of the forest answered her. Evelyn was alone, lost in the heart of Whispering Cove, with no idea how to find her way back. As the reality of her situation sank in, Evelyn felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through her. She had to find Marcus, had to stop Richard from whatever he was planning. But how? She closed her eyes, trying to center herself. "Okay, Evelyn," she muttered. "You're a guardian now. Act like it." Taking a deep breath, she opened herself up to the island's magic, just as Aunt Iris's journals had described. She felt it flowing around her, through her. And there, just at the edge of her consciousness, she felt something else. A tug, a connection. Marcus. Without hesitation, Evelyn set off in the direction of that feeling. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let Richard Blackwood destroy everything they had worked so hard to protect. As she made her way through the dense forest, guided by her connection to Marcus, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. A month ago, she would have scoffed at the idea of magic, of mystical connections. Now it felt as natural as breathing. And Marcus, the thought of him in danger made her heart clench in a way she hadn't expected. Despite everything that had happened between them, despite the years of separation and hurt, she realized that a part of her had never stopped caring for him. "Hang on, Marcus," she whispered as she pushed through a particularly dense patch of undergrowth. "I'm coming." Little did she know, the true test of their bond and of Whispering Cove's magic was yet to come. As Evelyn ventured deeper into the heart of the island, the very fabric of reality seemed to shift around her. The lines between past, present, and future blurred, and she found herself facing challenges that would push her to her very limits. But with each obstacle overcome, each test passed, Evelyn felt herself growing stronger, more in tune with the island's magic. And always, she felt that connection to Marcus, guiding her forward. As she finally broke through into another clearing, Evelyn knew she had reached her destination. There, in the center of the glade, stood a massive crystal formation, pulsing with otherworldly light. And before it, locked in what appeared to be magical combat, were Marcus and Richard. Evelyn's heart leapt at the sight of Marcus, but there was no time for reunion. Richard had clearly tapped into the island's power, and he was using it with a recklessness that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "You don't understand what you're doing," Marcus was shouting, deflecting a blast of energy with a shield of his own. "The island's magic isn't meant to be used like this." Richard laughed, a sound that sent chills down Evelyn's spine. "Oh, but it is, my boy. With this power, I can reshape the world as I see fit. No more failure, no more disgrace. I'll be unstoppable." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Evelyn said, stepping into the clearing. Both men turned to look at her, surprise evident on their faces. "Evelyn!" Marcus's voice was filled with relief. "You're okay," she nodded, moving to stand beside him. "I'm fine, and I'm not going anywhere." Richard's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. "How touching," he sneered. "The failed couple, reunited at last. No matter. I'll deal with you both." He raised his hands, channeling an enormous amount of the island's energy. The crystal behind him pulsed erratically, and Evelyn could feel the very ground beneath her feet trembling. "Marcus," she said urgently, "we have to stop him. If he keeps this up, he'll tear the island apart." Marcus nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Together?" Evelyn reached out and took his hand, feeling the island's magic surge between them. Together. As one, they raised their free hands, calling upon every ounce of knowledge and power they had gained over the past month. They felt the magic of Whispering Cove responding, flowing through them, amplified by their connection. Richard's onslaught met their combined shield, and for a moment, the clearing was filled with blinding light as the two forces clashed. Evelyn gritted her teeth, feeling the strain of holding back such raw power. But then, something unexpected happened. As she stood there, hand in hand with Marcus, facing down the greatest threat Whispering Cove had ever known, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. All the pain, all the resentment, all the hurt of the past years. It didn't disappear, but it transformed. In that moment of crisis, with everything on the line, Evelyn realized a fundamental truth. She still loved Marcus. Despite everything, despite the years apart and the broken dreams, her heart had never truly let him go. The realization hit Evelyn like a tidal wave, momentarily distracting her from the magical battle raging around them. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw the same emotion reflected in his eyes. In that instant, their connection deepened, and the magic flowing through them intensified tenfold. Their combined shield, which had been barely holding against Richard's onslaught, suddenly blazed with renewed strength. The clearing was filled with a blinding light, forcing Richard to stumble back, shielding his eyes. "What?" he snarled, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. "How are you doing this?" Evelyn and Marcus didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their actions, their unity, spoke louder than any words could. They advanced together, step by step, pushing Richard back towards the pulsing crystal formation. But Richard wasn't done yet. With a roar of frustration, he redoubled his efforts, drawing even more power from the island. The ground beneath their feet began to shake violently, and in the distance, Evelyn could hear the ominous sound of trees cracking and falling. "Marcus," she said urgently, "the island can't take much more of this. We need to end this now." Marcus nodded, his face set with grim determination. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Do you trust me?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "With my life." In one fluid motion, Marcus spun Evelyn towards the crystal, their hands still clasped tightly together. "Focus on the heart of the island," he instructed. "Channel everything you have into it. I'll hold off my father." Evelyn wanted to protest, to insist that they face this threat together, but she understood the logic of his plan. Taking a deep breath, she turned her attention to the massive crystal formation, feeling its rhythmic pulse resonating with her own heartbeat. Behind her, she could hear the clash of magical energies as Marcus engaged his father one-on-one. She wanted desperately to turn and help him, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Closing her eyes, Evelyn opened herself fully to the magic of Whispering Cove. It rushed into her like a flood, filling every fiber of her being. She could feel the island's joy and its pain, its hopes and its fears. Centuries of wishes, both granted and unfulfilled, flowed through her mind in a dizzying cascade of images and emotions. And then she heard it. The true song of Whispering Cove, a melody so beautiful and terrible that it brought tears to her eyes. This was the source of the island's power, the wellspring from which all its magic flowed. With trembling hands, Evelyn reached out and touched the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, she felt a jolt of energy so intense that it nearly knocked her off her feet. But she held on, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Please," she whispered, pouring every ounce of her will into the crystal. "Help us save you. Help us set things right." For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly at first, but with gathering speed, the crystal began to change. Its erratic pulsing steadied, falling into rhythm with Evelyn's heartbeat. The oppressive energy that had filled the clearing began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of calm and renewal. Behind her, Evelyn heard a cry of dismay. She turned to see Richard stumbling backward, the stolen power draining from him like water from a broken vessel. Marcus stood between them, his stance protective, his eyes fixed on his father. "It's over, Dad," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Let it go." For a moment, it seemed as though Richard might continue to fight, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. I wanted to make things right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "to undo all my mistakes." Evelyn felt a wave of compassion wash over her. She understood that desire all too well. Slowly, she approached the two men, the crystal's energy still humming through her veins. "We can't change the past," she said gently, "but we can choose how we move forward. The island, it's offering us a chance. All of us. As if in response to her words, the crystal pulsed once more, sending out a wave of energy that enveloped all three of them. Evelyn gasped as she felt the island's magic working through her, healing old wounds, soothing ancient hurts. She saw flashes of the past, her first meeting with Marcus, their whirlwind romance, the slow unraveling of their relationship. But instead of the pain these memories usually brought, she felt a sense of acceptance and understanding. Looking at Marcus, she could see that he was experiencing something similar. His eyes were wide with wonder, filled with unshed tears. And Richard, the bitter anger that had twisted his features was gone, replaced by a look of profound remorse and dawning hope. As the energy faded, leaving them standing in the now peaceful clearing, Evelyn knew that something fundamental had changed. The island had granted them a wish they hadn't even known they needed, the chance to heal, to forgive, to start anew. What happens now? Richard asked, his voice uncertain. Marcus looked at Evelyn, a question in his eyes. She nodded, understanding without words. Now, Marcus said, turning back to his father, we go home, all of us, and we start rebuilding what was broken. As they made their way back through the forest, following a path that seemed to open up before them, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The whispers of the island, once mysterious and sometimes menacing, now sounded like a chorus of congratulations and well wishes. They emerged from the trees to find the rest of Whispering Cove transformed. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the island for the past few days was gone, replaced by a vibrant energy that seemed to make every color brighter, every scent more vivid. As they approached Aunt Iris's house, their house now, Evelyn supposed, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. There, on the porch, sat the old boat captain who had brought them to the island a month ago. But he wasn't alone. Next to him, looking exactly as Evelyn remembered her, sat Aunt Iris herself. But how? Marcus sputtered, clearly as shocked as Evelyn felt. Aunt Iris smiled, her eyes twinkling with their familiar mischief. Did you really think I'd leave you to figure all this out on your own? I may be gone from the world, dears, but Whispering Cove, it's my home. Always has been, always will be. She stood, spreading her arms wide to encompass the island. You've done well, my darlings. Better than I could have hoped. You've restored the balance, healed old wounds, and opened your hearts to the true magic of this place. Her gaze fell on Richard, who shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. But there was no judgment in Aunt Iris's eyes, only compassion. Welcome home, Richard. It's been far too long. As the sun began to set on their last day on Whispering Cove, Evelyn found herself once again standing on the beach, watching the waves roll in. But this time, she wasn't alone. Marcus stood beside her, their hands intertwined. So, he said, his voice soft, what do we do now? Evelyn turned to look at him, taking in the face she had once known better than her own. It was older now, marked by the years and experiences that had shaped them both. But in his eyes, she saw the same warmth, the same love that had first captured her heart all those years ago. I don't know, she admitted, but I do know one thing. What's that? Marcus asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Evelyn squeezed his hand, feeling the magic of Whispering Cove humming through them both. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As if in response to her words, a gentle breeze swept over them, carrying with it the now familiar whispers of the island. But this time, Evelyn understood what they were saying. It was a blessing, a promise, and a reminder all in one. The greatest magic of all is love. Nurture it, cherish it, and it will light your way through even the darkest of times. Evelyn and Marcus stood there on the beach, hand in hand, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The future was uncertain, full of challenges they had yet to face. But here, in this moment, with the magic of Whispering Cove flowing through them and the rekindled love between them, Evelyn knew that they could face anything. As the last light faded from the sky, Evelyn made a silent wish, not for success or wealth or power, but for the strength to hold on to this moment, this feeling, no matter what life might throw their way. And somewhere in the heart of the island, in a clearing now peaceful and serene, a crystal pulsed once in acknowledgement. The wish was granted, its price already paid in full by the love and courage that had saved Whispering Cove. The adventure was over, But in many ways, Evelyn knew it was also just beginning. Whatever came next, she and Marcus would face it as they had faced the challenges of the island. Together, hand in hand, their hearts beating as one. As the ferry pulled away from Whispering Cove, Evelyn leaned against the railing, watching the mystical island slowly disappear into the mist. Marcus stood beside her, his arm wrapped comfortingly around her waist. Behind them, Richard sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon, lost in thought. The past month had been a whirlwind of magic, danger, and self-discovery. They were leaving the island changed in ways they were only beginning to understand. The magic of Whispering Cove had healed old wounds, rekindled lost love, and offered a chance at redemption. But it had also taught them valuable lessons about the power of choices, the importance of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of love. As the last glimpse of the lighthouse faded from view, Evelyn felt a pang of sadness mixed with excitement for what lay ahead. She turned to Marcus, seeing her own emotions reflected in his eyes. "It feels strange, doesn't it?" she said softly, leaving it all behind. Marcus nodded, pulling her closer. "But we're not really leaving it behind, are we? Whispering Cove is a part of us now." He was right, of course. Evelyn could still feel the island's magic thrumming through her veins, a constant reminder of the extraordinary adventure they had shared. She knew that no matter where life took them next, a part of them would always belong to that enchanted place. Richard cleared his throat, drawing their attention. I want to thank you both," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "for giving me a second chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll do better." Evelyn and Marcus exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Then Marcus reached out, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "We all got a second chance, Dad. Let's make the most of it." As the ferry docked at the mainland, reality began to set in. They had responsibilities waiting for them, lives to return to. But Evelyn knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. In the following weeks, as they settled back into their routines, Evelyn and Marcus began the delicate process of rebuilding their relationship. There were long conversations over coffee, laughter-filled dinners, and quiet moments of simply enjoying each other's company. It wasn't always easy. They both had baggage to work through, old habits to unlearn. But the magic of Whispering Cove had given them a solid foundation to build upon. Richard, true to his word, sought help for his gambling addiction and began the long process of making amends to those he had hurt over the years. It was a slow journey, filled with setbacks and small victories, but Evelyn and Marcus stood by him every step of the way. As for the island itself, they knew their responsibilities as guardians weren't over. Once a month, they would return to Whispering Cove, tending to its magic and helping those who came seeking the island's power. Each visit was a reminder of the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. One evening, as Evelyn sat in their new shared apartment, working on a particularly challenging case, she felt a familiar whisper in the back of her mind. Smiling, she closed her eyes and opened herself to the island's magic. In her mind's eye, she saw the crystal in the heart of Whispering Cove, pulsing with a warm, comforting light. "What is it?" Marcus asked, noticing her distracted expression. Evelyn opened her eyes, her smile widening. "The island. It's calling us home." Marcus grinned, already reaching for their packed bags. They had learned to be ready at a moment's notice. "Well then, Mrs. Blackwood, shall we answer?" As they headed out the door, hand in hand, Evelyn felt a thrill of excitement. Their adventure wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The magic of Whispering Cove had changed their lives forever, opening their eyes to a world of wonder and possibility. And so, dear listener, as our tale of Whispering Cove comes to a close, I invite you to reflect on your own life. What hidden magic might be waiting for you, just beyond the mist of the ordinary? What wounds might be healed? What loves rekindled, if only you open your heart to the possibility of wonder? Remember, the greatest magic of all lies within you, in your capacity to love, to forgive, and to grow. Nurture that magic, and who knows what incredible adventures might await. But the story doesn't end here. Oh no, this is just the beginning. Evelyn and Marcus's journey continues, and so does yours. What wishes will you make? What prices will you be willing to pay? The choice, as always, is yours. If you've enjoyed this tale of love, magic, and second chances, I invite you to share it with others who might find inspiration in its pages. After all, stories have a magic all their own, don't they? They have the power to transport us, to transform us, to show us new possibilities we never dreamed existed. And who knows, perhaps somewhere out there, hidden in the mists of your own life, there's a whispering cove waiting for you, a place of magic and wonder, of challenges and growth, of love lost and found again. So keep your eyes open, your heart ready, and your spirit adventurous. Because in this vast, mysterious world of ours, anything is possible, and the next great adventure might be just around the corner. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey. If you've enjoyed our time together on Whispering Cove, please consider subscribing to our channel for more enchanting tales. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue crafting stories that spark imagination and touch hearts. And remember, in the words of Aunt Iris, magic is everywhere if you only know how to look for it. Until our next adventure, may your days be filled with wonder, your nights with dreams of possibility, and your heart with the courage to chase them both. Farewell for now, dear friends, and may the whispers of magic always guide you home.